Okay, yeah, so my animation window had vanished on me, and I like to blame the software, but it was user error. I had a 2 monitor setup, and I had my monitor turned off. My monitor off to the right had the animation window when I was working on a previous project. So, back in my original setup here, maybe I'm back. Where am I at? There we go. Okay, so I want to open up my animation window. I'm going to take my animation window and I'm going to nest this kind of behind my my scene in my game view here so that I don't lose focus on this. Want to make sure that my player is selected. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to build an animation for this player object. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure that the player is selected. I'm going to go over here to this little drop-down menu. It's just to the left of the samples. If I click on that, I'm going to create a new clip. Now, the first time I do this, it's prompting me to save this animation. And so what I want to do is I'll save this either directly in my assets, or I'm going to just save it directly into my 2D assets, where this is where the sprite sheet is. So the animation that I'm going to create right now is an idle animation. I'll hit save. So now I have an idle animation clip that I'm creating. And what I want to do is I want to go into the 2D assets. I want to find my idle sprite. I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to scroll down until the very last sprite in the sprite sheet, and I'll shift click. I'm going to click and drag and drop this on the little gray bar up here. That adds a keyframe for each one of those sprites. And I'm going to take my sample size down from 60 to 30. So we'll run that at about 30 frames per second. Maybe I'll take it down to even 20. So there's my idle animation. Now, the minute that we create our first animation with our player selected, and then we create an animation clip here, you'll notice that you get an animation clip that pops up in the location where you save the animation. In addition to that, you get an animator controller. So we have a player controller here. That's in the animator window, not to be confused with animation. So we have this animator window now, and we have, as our default animation, we have idle. So you can see that that's yellow. As we build more animation clips in our animation window, we're going to get additional states in our animator. So let's do that. Let's build a walk state. So I'm going to go to this little drop-down menu. I'm going to create a new clip. Okay. So I'm dealing with the player object, but I'm going to click on it to make sure it is in fact selected. And I'm just going to go to create new clip. And the clip that I want to create is walk. And I'll save. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to collapse the idle script. I'm going to go find the walk sprite sheet. And I'll just shift click and make sure I have all those selected. And I'll drag those into the timeline. And I'm going to take down the sample to 30 frames per second. Now, if I jump back over into the animator, and I can go to Window, Animator, well, I have it nested here in this tab, you can see that I now have a second animation clip. Okay, so Animator is a state machine, just like Playmaker is a state machine, and there are some things that we can do to use the power of Animator to handle some of the transitions, but we can also simply use Playmaker as our state machine to talk to Animator. So right now, when I run this project, the idle animation is the default animation. That's just going to play. That's going to play whenever. So I'm going to hit the play button. That should take us out to our game scene, and I can see that that character is just idling. Now, it doesn't look very good, and that's because I think that take a look at this. I'm going to go back into my idle animation. I think I missed something here. Yep, so the max size when I imported this sprite sheet was actually smaller, 124 pixels, smaller than the actual art. So I'm going to bump that up to 4096. So I'm going to hit apply. And let me see if that took care of the problem. It should take care of it automatically. So yeah, that actually looks a lot better. You may not see it in the screencast, but you'll see it on screen if you're following along with these assets. That was a lot better. So I need to do the same thing for the walk cycle because I missed that. So I'm just going to select the entire sprite sheet, not the individual sprites. And I'm going to come over here to the max size, and I'm going to set that to 4096 and hit apply. So right now we have an idle animation. and it's sitting in idling, but we can use our left and right, and we're still running our idle animation when we're moving left and right. And our goal here is to switch the animation states in Animator, so that if we're moving left or right, we're running this walk animation. Okay, so I'm going to go back to game. I'm going to go back to scene, and I'm going to select my player, and I'm going to focus down here for a moment. So the walk cycle, I'm not going to flip the sprite yet. I'm going to handle that a little bit later. But right now, I just want to run the animator clip when I'm moving either right or left. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the move right or move left state, and I'm going to go up to my animator actions, and from here what we're going to do is, I believe it's animator play. Let's take a look at this. Plays a state. This can be used to synchronize your animation to audio. Yeah, let's give that a shot. We'll just play animator play. We're going to use the owner game object and the state name that we're going to play. We're looking for a state called walk. Okay, so if we look back at animator, this is the state that we want to play. We called it walk. And so we added an action. So when I hit the right button right now, the move right, we should see the walk animation play. We'll hit play. I can see it's idling. And then when I hit the play button on the right, it starts to run the walk animation. Now, when it comes back to idle, we want to play the idle animation once again. So let me toggle the play button off. I'll go back to idle, and I'm going to do animator play. I'm adding that to the idle state of our character controller. We're going to once again use the game owner as the object to talk to the animator. The state name that we want to play is the idle animation. Excuse me. So again, I have the idle animation. Now the idle animation, this is the default animation according to Animator, but the minute that we kick over to tell it to play the walk animation, idle is no longer playing. So now, if we hit the play button, we should be able to walk right and get the walk cycle, and then when we let off the key, we transition right back to idle. When I go left, I'm still stuck in the idle state. That's just because we're not playing any clip in Animator. So I'm going to go to move left. I'll do animator play. We'll use owner, and we'll call this walk. So now we could do a couple things based on moving left. So right now this animation will look pretty good when we're moving left. That'll actually walk in the direction, or my sprite is pointing in the right direction. Probably what we'll do is that when we move to the right, we can flip this sprite. Now there's a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to just grab the move right state just to kind of build a quick test. And I should just be able to go into transform and do a quick set scale. Let's do a set scale here. I'm going to set scale of the owner, and I'm going to set the X scale to -1. So in other words, when we press the right key, we're going to scale this in the opposite direction. So if I just take this and go -1, okay, we get the opposite side of the sprite. All right, so I'll just send that back to 1. So I'll do a quick test. So when I go right, he flips. And I'm going to do a left-sided set scale as well. So we'll do a set scale. Did I get it? No. Set scale. And we'll set the X value back to 1. So we move left. The sprite is scaled in its normal direction of X, or its standard direction. And so now we can flip the sprite back and forth based on left key, right key, left key, right key. Okay, so now there's a pretty wicked kind of flip in terms of its registration. I mean, it kind of, because that sprite has a lot of negative space in it, I select, go back to my scene, this whole thing is the sprite, and it's kind of flipping like right here in the middle, and so there's kind of a pretty wicked kind of negative space, so it's not actually rotating on the center of our character, but that's okay. That's just kind of built into the sprite, and we could do some things to fix that, but we're not going to worry about it. So, so yeah, that's a simple 2D control system, and playing Animator clips. Pretty straightforward. And again, separating the move left and move right gave us some really simple control to set the scale of the sprite. We could do some things. There's a really great tutorial by the folks over at Unity. If I can type. If you go into the Learn section and you go to Tutorials and you go to 2D, I would highly recommend looking at all of these, specifically the 2D character controller. This is basically just a kind of a it'll give you a lot of information about setting up 2D games. So I would go through these, and pretty much everything that they do in script here, there's a counterpart in Playmaker that you can use. So I'm going to work through building a simple tutorial for a 2D game in Playmaker, talking to the animator. But there's a really nice, if you look at this 2D character controller, they kind of go in depth looking at animator and using some of the velocities and some of the advanced functionality of the state machine inside of animator. And there's some really good stuff. There's some blending trees happening here, so we can see the animation playing here. And let's see if I can get back to my game. Let me see if I can peel the game window out here and focus on animator for a second. Yeah, so we can see that as we're playing our game and we're moving left and right, we're calling this walk animation. And so we could do the same thing, like if we jump and we apply force, we could fire off that jump animation. So but that's just a quick overview. I'll continue to push these real quick tutorials forward over the course of the next week, and I'll get them out to everybody. So stay tuned. If you have any specific questions, shoot me an email. Oh no.